Welcome to another episode of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. Yes, got it out. I'm here. I'm Nathan. I've got Tyson with me. We are so stoked to talk with you and nerd out with you here for a little bit of time. We're honored that you'd spend some time with us. And we're talking about something pretty special today. We're talking about how to monetize your music skills. Yes, get the monies for your music skills. It's possible. You don't have to be Beyonce. You don't have to be Drake. You can just be you. And you can be you and use your skills that you have with music and actually get paid for it. I love this topic, and I know Tyson does too, so we're excited to get into this with you. If, by the way, you want to monetize this music skills and you want to work on these music skills, aka working on the song-making stuff, lyrics, melodies, mixing, producing, all that kind of stuff, if you want to work through that in a systematic way, which I highly advise because it makes it so easy for you to show up every day and know what to do, like how do you practice getting better, so you can have skills to monetize, I have a free guide for you. I would love for you to check it out. It's at finishsongsguide.com. Completely free. It's a 10-page PDF, and it's just a step-by-step process to walk you through how to start with nothing. You can literally sit down at your DAW, pick up your guitar, however you create music, start with nothing, walk through these 5 steps, and you'll have a finished song. And that's the name of the game, finished songs, right? So if you're interested in that, please check it out. It's totally free, finishsongsguide.com. Okay, let's dive into this monetizing your music skills here. And we've got a couple steps we want to walk through. And maybe, Tyson, let's let you start us off, man. We've got step 1, all right? How do we monetize our music skills?
Yeah, so the very first step in monetizing your skills in music is building an audience. And this is the most prescribed advice probably in music.
It so is.
But it doesn't make it any less true. So this is, and yeah, the other part is it's applicable for everybody. So, and let's back up and define what an audience is. It is people that you know how to reach, and you can reach them with a message. Doesn't matter how, whether they're Instagram followers, whether they're YouTube subscribers, whether they're on your email list, whether they're just contacts inside of your phone. That is still an audience, right? So it's people that you have a way to contact them, and they probably have some sort of relationship with you, because people who obviously have a relationship with you probably trust you more and are more willing to pay you for your skills in music. And so trying to keep this general, for artists, but also for producers, mixing engineers, mastering engineers, the power of an audience is that they're the most likely to hire you to do your skill or consume your music or buy your merchandise, whatever you have to sell to ultimately monetize your skills. And I guess a lot of people want to be able to just skip this step. They're like, what's the, how do I build an audience? Or it seems like a lot of work to build an audience, etc. But I would challenge you, do you know anybody who is successful in music that doesn't have an audience? And the answer is probably no. Nathan, do you know anybody?
Here's the thing. I could even try to advocate for because I've been undercover for much of my music career, but even then it's like there's still an audience. I don't a sync placement goes somewhere because there's an audience to consume the visual. You know what I mean? So it's I don't think you can get around it.
Yeah, and even though you're doing sync, right, you still have an audience of people who are hiring you to do the sync
and
licensing, or create the songs for the sync licensing.
Yes.
So I really just don't think that it's possible to do it with the way that we've defined an audience, which is basically people you can contact, because somebody needs to be able to hire you somehow, right?
And maybe you don't need. Maybe there's the thing: you don't need a big one. You don't need a massive you don't need millions of followers or something like that. No, not at all. But you do need an audience. Yeah.
Right. And so we plan on creating another episode here about actually how to build an audience. And so I want to refer you to a future episode where we're going to be talking about an audience, how to build an audience, and how Nathan and I have built audiences over the years to do our skill in music. But I don't think we have quite enough time in this episode to cover all of that. But just a couple quick things. Actually, I don't want to cover that yet. in the second half of this episode, we're going to be diving really deep into just the very basics of building that community, that audience for yourself to monetize. But again, we're going to go way deeper into a future episode as well. So, Nathan, do you want to tell us and explain to us why audiences are even valuable? Why would I want this list of people that I can contact? Like, what can we do?
Yeah, and I think that's the question. What can you do? You can do anything. You can do anything. There's this awesome saying, right? Like, without an audience, nothing is possible, right? But with an audience, anything is possible. And I think we got to credit Graham Cochran for that. I think he said that. Like, so freaking true. And I think that's the point. Why are audiences valuable? Well, because if you don't have one, it's going to be much harder to do all the stuff that you want to do with your music and whatever that looks like, right? Because if you have people, now you have options. You just have options and you have freedom. You actually have more of an opportunity to actually bring these dreams that you have to life, because there's people there who can, again, like Tyson said, receive the message that you have, who can actually engage with you in the ways that would help you towards your goals, right? But if you don't have an audience, there's nowhere for any of these skills that you want to monetize to go. Like, it's landing on dead ears. It's actually landing on no ears, right? Because there's like nobody there. But if you have an audience, now all of a sudden, really anything is possible for your music skills and whatever that looks like. If it's like service based, if it's like, like project based, or like a big project or something, like you can do anything and everything. If you yourself want to start creating educational content because you have a part of the process that is super fun and easy to you, but you're realizing, oh, this isn't easy for everybody, I could step in and help. And now you could build a whole other part of this music thing that becomes possible because you have an audience. And I know Tyson and I could both speak to how that kind of decision, it's like it all affects each other. Like, helping people with educational content, and then all of a sudden you're getting clients for your own services, and then it's a wonderful thing. So I think that's the goal. That's the thing to remember. If you remember nothing else, just remember that, without an audience, nothing's possible. With an audience, anything is possible. So it's worth building. And I don't want to say like building in the whole toxic, like, whatever, because like Tyson said, this is the most overused advice ever, especially today. Like, build an audience. You need an audience, platform, build, blah, like it's everywhere. You know what I mean? And it's part of it is true, and that's the kind of part that we want to touch on. So I think maybe we'll just kind of move on, because you can just do a YouTube search and you'll find Gary V proclaiming, this is all you should do. You can find a whole bunch of people talking about this, but we do believe it's important.
I want to add one more point here before we move on. So there's only two ways to build an audience. So just touching on this a little bit to give you some practical advice here from this episode, not just like, have an audience, but we're not going to tell you how to build it.
Go do it.
So here's your practical advice on how to build an audience. So to have any sort of business exchange, people exchange money for value, right? So it's an exchange of value. So money is value, and then you get value in return. For example, I'm trying to produce a song and I'm not very good at mixing. So I'm going to take my multi-tracks and I'm going to exchange them for money to somebody else to then mix it. And then I get a good song, a better sounding song back. And that's value that I receive. They receive money in exchange for that. So it's an exchange of value, right? That's the basic principle of business and how it works. So if you have a skill, right, you can exchange doing that skill for money because it's a valuable skill. If you're good at it, right? That's kind of the underlying factor
enough
here. But with that being said, the core problem that most people run into is that even if you possess a good skill, you don't have anybody to reach to make that exchange. Because there's people out there who would be willing to pay you money for your skills. You just need to figure out how to reach them. So that is where the audience comes in. And so there's two ways to build that audience. The first way is to reach them one-to-one. So I'm going to call them, I'm going to email them, I'm going to DM them on Instagram. Yeah, those are pretty much the only three ways that I have.
Let's rock. Yeah.
So basically one-to-one communication, right? So think messaging or phone calls, texts, things like that. The other way is through content, which is one to many. So me posting a YouTube video is I say something once, hundreds of people can consume that information.
Yeah.
TikTok, another way. I record a short video once, I say it once, and then hundreds or thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people can then consume that content and be exposed to me and my message. Once they've consumed that content, they know about me and are, they may be pulled into my world by clicking the follow button or clicking that subscribe button on YouTube. After they've done that, now they can consume more of my content if they want to and get to know me a little bit. Or ultimately, I can then make an ask of that audience at some point in time. Like, oh, I have a brand new offer of producing a single, and I guarantee it's going to get 100,000 streams. Now, all of a sudden, I have an audience that I can reach with that via email, text, calling, through my YouTube video, through my Instagram profile, whatever, like through a reel. I can post all of this stuff to then make an ask from that audience. And then without going too deep in this, like the more asks you make, the more it kind of turns people off because you just feel, a little bit selfish or that's their perception of you, right? So you want to be able to give before you ask. But that's kind of the main principles that I want to be able to communicate is that, first of all, without an audience, nothing is possible. With an audience, anything is possible. To build an audience, you have basically two ways, one-to-one communication or one-to-many. And then the last is make sure that you're giving to that audience before you ask anything in return. And naturally, if you give to people and they find it valuable, they're going to come to you and ask you if they can give you something or if they can hire you. So most of the time, most of my business from mastering actually came from YouTube of people finding a very specific video that I made of me mixing a song or mastering a song, against Mixia, so DistroKid's mastering service. And I basically compared the two masters of the same exact song. And then people would then email me or find my website and they would message me saying, oh, hey, I saw this video and your master was way better than the Mixia master. Would you be willing to master my song? So that was almost all of my business, or I shouldn't say all of my business, but a large chunk of it came from this just one simple video that I made of me comparing my song versus Mixia's songs, or mastering service, I should say. And that ultimately built an audience that then was interested in the service that I had to provide people. So that is just a quick example of how to build an audience and the power of an audience. And let's move on. Actually, before I do, I have one more point. Sorry. So the pitfall that always occurs when people are starting on this journey of building an audience is everybody wants a shortcut. In reality, there are no shortcuts to building an audience. You can build an audience faster, but that's not a shortcut. That is just, you have to put in more effort to do it.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, if you want what other people don't have, you have to do what other people aren't willing to do to get that thing. If you want a bigger audience on Instagram than anybody else, you're going to have to produce better content and more of it to build that audience. That's just the reality of social media platforms and building an audience. So there are very few shortcuts, and the only shortcuts there are is developing your skill, which in and of itself is not a shortcut. It's just you got better at doing the thing. So all of that being said, I want to encourage you to build an audience and think about how you're going to build an audience. But also, it doesn't need to be in the more traditional sense. You don't need a massive Instagram following. You don't need a massive YouTube. You just need to be able to reach people. That could be through emailing people. That could be DMing people on Reddit. It could be a number of things in order to actually build that audience of people who know you and trust you and are willing to pay you for your services. And this is no difference if you're an artist versus an engineer. If you're an artist, you need fans to buy your merch, to listen to your songs, to stream your songs. Right? That's the same type of deal as well. Okay. With that, what's the next step? So we've now built an audience somehow, in some way. We have a list of people that we can reach. What do we do next, Nathan?
We make money. All right, cool. Thanks, guys, for listening. We will see you all next. That would be so mean. No, yeah, but step 2, you have an audience now. So like we've established, anything's possible. So this is the money-making part. But here's the thing. You have to start with, what do you want? Like, what is your goal? And okay, obviously, to make money. Yeah, okay, you get more specific, right? Like, have enough money to pay the bills. Are we talking get filthy rich? Are we talking Taylor Swift monies, right? Like, you're just up in the stratosphere with your wealth, right? Like, you need to identify what you're going for. And this is probably like almost like season dependent too. Like, where are you at right now? Maybe a awesome starting point is, hey, what if you just had enough to pay the bills? That is like crazy. You actually would be in a very small percentage of people out here doing this music thing that are actually making enough to pay their bills. That is crazy. That is crazy cool. Like, I would encourage you, if that's the starting point, that's the starting point, and you could always build and scale from there. But at least pause for a second, and please don't do what young Nathan would do, which is, I just want to make money, and you're not even getting specific about it. Because if you don't get specific about it, how do you know if you did it, right? How do you know if you arrived at that point? So take a second, define what your goal is, right? And then I think in tandem with that, I've been learning, it's not just enough to say, like, what you want, but you also need to ask and think about, how do you want it, right? Because this is huge. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could get to paying the bills. There really is. There's a whole bunch of different avenues, paths that you could take to achieve paying your bills. But how are you going to feel at that moment, right? Like, the way that you did it, the way that you built your life, and that it requires you to show up in a certain way. Are you pumped about that, right? Or is it in a draining, soul-sucking kind of fashion where you're paying the bills with music, but man, you are at the mercy of like 10, 20 clients who are all telling you what to do, and you're like, this feels no different than having a boss, right? And instead of having one boss, you've got like 20 bosses who are telling you what to do with their song or with whatever, right? So think about not just what you want, a number, a goal with the money, but then how do you want to get there, right? And I think I just think that's a powerful conversation. What do you think, Tyson, about that? Like, just for a second. I don't think anybody's really talking about this as much.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of I like this analogy of ordering a steak. So once you decide you want a steak, they then they follow up the question, do you want your steak medium, medium rare, well done? Like, there's all these options of how you want to eat your steak. And it's a very potentially different experience based on how you want your steak. A well done steak is a very different experience eating it than an extremely rare steak, right?
Yes.
That they just slapped it on the plate. They didn't even throw it on the grill first, right? Very different experiences in consuming your steak. And this is the same exact thing. You could ultimately, like, you're still getting the steak, but it's how you want that steak to be. So, for example, do you want to be in the spotlight as an artist, right? Or do you want to be behind the scenes like Nathan, be a little, songwriting guru over here, writing songs for companies to be able to put on their TV and film and ads and whatever else they need those songs for. So that's one option, or I guess a couple options.
Sure.
The other way that you want to think about it is how much work, or how is the work going to impact your life? For example, as a mastering engineer, I didn't really think about this before I got into mastering, but I have to talk to a lot of people all the time. I spend a disproportionate amount of my music time of my work life inside of my inbox answering emails and requests for masters and sample masters than I ever do actually mastering. I spend more time messaging people than I do mastering. So recognizing that there's a trade-off here. So I love mastering and I like doing it, but I don't actually get to do it as much as I probably thought when I first started. Versus if I was doing larger projects such as mixing or producing, then I would spend more time producing than I would emailing people, because one client means 30 hours worth of work if I'm producing an entire song.
Sure.
Versus if I'm mastering a song, I have half an hour, maybe an hour worth of work for one client. And so I have to get more clients to then fill up my day of paying work. Yes. So that's another side of it. Is it not just like how behind the scenes versus in front of the scenes do I want to be? It's how many people do I need to work with, and how is that going to impact my life? If I'm working with 100 people every single week, is that going to be more of a burden on me than, being able to work with one client every single week? On the flip side, if you're doing a larger project for an artist, right? So one artist is 2 months worth of work for you out of the year. You might then have to recognize that if that client decides to go with somebody else or not hire you for that project, or they don't have enough money and then they just like pull the plug last minute, now you're out of work for 2 months and you need to be able to fill that with other paying work, or figure something out, drive Uber or something. So recognizing the inherent risks with both sides as well, backing up, it's basically business models, right? What business model do you want to be able to make money with your music and with your skills as a music producer? So there's tons of different ways to go about this, but consider what your life will actually look like once you're doing this, and extrapolate that to the nth degree that you possibly can, or at least try to, right? Imagine doing this day in and day out and what your life will look like, which is ultimately, cards on the table here, why I decided that mastering wasn't really the route for me. It was great for a season and I loved doing it, but at the end of the day, I wanted to do this more music management, kind of like full service production type of deal, doing video along with audio, along with marketing and all this other stuff for artists, rather than just doing one single part of the process, because it was more challenging, it was more fun, and ultimately I think we add way more value to artists being able to produce an entire single for them rather than just one little itty bitty part of the process, which is mastering. So again, like you might pivot once you get down this route, but at the same time, just try to imagine, like, what is my life going to be like? What's going to be the most meaningful for both me and other people, and what adds the most value to the world overall?
It's huge. I could talk about that kind of stuff for a long time, because I didn't get it right for a long time. So like it means a lot to be more thoughtful. Fellow musicians, I encourage you to be more thoughtful. It's just art, man, and I just want the money. Like, come on. This isn't the podcast for you. If you just it's all art and money. No, there's we can think a little deeper. We can get a little more nuanced with stuff so that you actually have a life in which you're creating the way that you want to, and have a life that you're proud of. Because I really, and I know Tyson does too, I want you to get exactly to where you want to go with your music goals and your dreams, because your music matters. It deserves to be heard. It's worth fighting for. But man, I don't want you to get to where you've always dreamt of being and that your life sucks. You know what I mean? Because then what was the point? You're doing music full time, but you just feel awful and you don't have time to show up for the relationships in your life. You know what I mean? Like, we just care about that stuff. I know Tyson does too. So that's kind of why we started this conversation with that. But now we're going to get to the part which I'm sure you probably really, really care about, which is cool. Thanks guys. Thanks for looking out for me. But how do I do it? How do I do this thing? I want to make money right now. Okay, fine. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, Tyson. How do we do it? Step one, maybe go online. Go online, and you want to find communities of people talking about music.
And if you don't know how to go online, make sure you hook up your phone line to your computer. You'll hear this weird, alien buzzing noise. It'll go
and you'll know that you're just about there.
Sorry, anyway, for all the millennials and older people, you'll appreciate that one. But so,
right,
step one.
Maybe you walk us through. Yeah, walk us through.
Sorry, I kind of took over there, Nathan. But so step one, go online. Hopefully you have something slightly faster than dial-up. The second thing is also your mom will get mad at you because you're taking over the phone line. She can't call her friends.
Yeah, if you're rocking dial-up, I don't know that was the podcast for you right now.
You probably can't even consume this podcast. We're not hitting our community here. Okay, anyway,
that's right.
So go online, find communities talking about music. If you don't know how to find communities talking about music, go to a site called google.com, so google.com, and there's going to be a little bar in the middle of the screen, and you type in music production, type in music artists, or something around music, and you'll probably find Reddit forums. You're gonna find Sound on Sound. You're gonna find blogs, all this stuff about music.
Yes.
dive into those areas, and you're going to find other people talking about music. Forums are a great place to start because there's just normal people talking about music, and engage with these communities. So step 3 is to find out what problems exist for members in the community. So it's not just about finding the community and then just start DMing everybody possible. I'm a mixing engineer, hire me, right? That is going to turn people off. They're never going to hire you. And there's enough, you've probably received some of those messages and you know how they come across. So just don't be that person. Okay.
Yeah, just don't be the person.
And find out what problems exist for the members in that community. And then find out how your skills can solve those problems, because nobody wants to hire somebody unless they actually have a real problem that they're trying to solve. Yes. For example, if somebody has terrible sounding mixes, they might be in the market for a mixing engineer if they're aware that their song sounds terrible because of the mix. Then you can approach them, be a real human, build a relationship with them, and show them how you can solve those problems for them. Do a test mix, do a test master, just to show that you can actually do what you say you can do. And if they like it, if you get that far into the process, more than likely they're going to hire you because they have some sort of relationship with you. You've proved that you can do the skills, and ultimately you can then exchange that value for money conversation.
Yes, I love that. And people are super duper honest on the internet. It's kind of crazy. Like, people will bare their heart and soul and deepest secrets on the internet of all places. So like a place that was super helpful for me was Facebook groups. Because there's groups around anything and everything. So for me, I know that I was trying to offer my skill set of songwriting and production. There's songwriting groups and there's production groups. And so I would get in there and I would, you just kind of lurk for a little bit, and you just kind of scroll and you consume, and you will notice like 3, 4, 5 main questions, main topics that are coming up. And there's some where a member of the community, these are my favorite, where a member of the community would post a question and you get like 60 responses. So you're really seeing from real people out here who are struggling with something. You can actually see their own language of how they're describing struggling with this, and you can use that to help you better present yourself because you're really speaking their language. Because sometimes there can be a disconnect, like between from where you are at, and especially if you've been doing this music stuff for a little bit, you have a certain proficiency in it. And you have the professional talk. You can talk at that level to where maybe someone like Tyson or I, we can all nerd out with you and understand what you're talking about when you're talking about EQ curves and bells and you're talking about compression and ratio. Like, yeah, okay, we can rock with you there. But people who are looking for help probably aren't at that level. That's why they're looking for help. And so they're just using everyday kitchen talk. Yeah, I just can't. Hey, it's like a question could be like, hey, anybody know how to make my vocals sound more normal? It sounds all over the place. And they're talking about compression or something, right? They're like, I just can't get, it just sounds loud here and soft here. Like, that's how most people are talking that need help. So it can be super informative to go into the interweb, Reddit, wherever. Facebook groups was helpful for me, just to see how people are actually talking about problems so that you can position yourself as the fix in the normal everyday talk. Because chances are, if you hop in and say, oh yeah, what compressor are you using? There's a chance that could be like, what is a compressor? You know what I mean? And now you're really not positioning yourself as well as someone who can say like, oh man, I totally get that. Yeah, when things get quiet here and like loud over here, it's so frustrating because a vocal, we want it to be consistent, right? Yeah, I've learned, and you know what I'm saying? Like, you can just start a conversation entering where that person is. So that was helpful for me because I felt like there was a disconnect from what I could talk like around fellow nerds, and then what people who actually could benefit from my services, people who could actually hire me, were talking about. I think that was important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to share a little bit about my experience doing this when I was first starting mastering, and I had no clients. I needed clients to make money, right? Yes. So I was in that same exact position. I'll show you step by step exactly what I did. So if you're a mastering engineer, if you're good at mastering, then do this, okay? So I went online. I found communities talking about music. I found some key Reddit communities. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but you can probably find them. They're pretty popular. I found some Reddit communities where people were talking about music, and one in specifically, where it's just a whole bunch of just normal musicians, super producers or wannabe super producers posting their music on the forum to give each other feedback. And then I went into those specific communities and I started giving feedback on all of their mixes. I gave feedback on their mixes, on their masters. And then, really sneaky, I actually downloaded their song off those sites. So whether it was a YouTube video, a SoundCloud link, whatever, I would actually stream that and record it into my DAW. I would then master it for them.
What?
And then I would DM them with the master. So then I could actually present. I did this all without their permission, and I just would DM them the master. And so some people would respond. They would be like, "Oh my goodness, this sounds so much better. Do you do this?" It's like, yes, I do. So anyway, and then I would get projects from that. So some of my very first projects after I decided to go into mastering were from that exact system of what I did. I would go on there, I would put it in my DAW, I would master it, I would give it to them. Right? This process wasn't necessarily quick. Like I put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
But because I gave them a master without asking anything in return, all of a sudden it created this this like goodwill between me and that person. Some people just never responded. And, some people won't ever. Some people didn't like my master. They're like, yeah, it's all right. It's cool, I guess. It's not worth, whatever you want to charge for it, which was also fine. Like, not everybody's going to love what you do for them. But by doing enough, you're going to get some of those people then engage with you to, hire you for your services. So I would say if you want to do something like that, do it consistently and do a lot of it. Kind of a sneaky thing that I did in that process was that I was also iterating my skill of being able to master, because when I first started, I still wasn't a very good mastering engineer, but because I sat here at my desk and I did that day in and day out for weeks on end, I figured out that how to master even better, especially with tracks that were all over the place. Some were really good, some were really terrible, but ultimately I was able to iterate my skill of mastering and figure out what to do on each song to be able to make it sound really good. And it made me a better mastering engineer. And then I would get more projects because the masters I would give people were even better. So, right.
So good.
And just being generous in that way is very attractive to people who also want to reciprocate that generosity and then hire you for their project. So great ways to be able to, I think that's just makes a really practical example of how you do it. Obviously that's a little bit more difficult if you're, trying to mix, you don't have access to their multi-tracks. But that's just a really practical way to be able to go out and get some clients by being generous first.
I think too, I love that so much, because I think the key takeaway for anybody, no matter what sphere of the process you want to try to do for people, that was just a bit of grinding. That was you know what I mean? Just the hard work and just choosing to show up differently, choosing to be generous and choosing to go out of your way to do something that took you time without a guaranteed hire, without a guaranteed paycheck, without it leading to anything, And I think that's the kind of stuff that you need to do. How do I make money with my music? How do I make money using these skills? How can I mix for people? How can I all that kind of stuff? It really is going to come down to you choosing to be generous. You're going to have to give to get. Go out of your way. That's how you stick out. It's so sad, but a lot of people nowadays don't really like to work hard. Number one, so work ethic is its own thing. If you have work ethic, you will stick out to the right people, and then also to go out of your way. Generous people are far and few between nowadays too. It's sad. So that's a killer combo. If you just have a work ethic and you're generous, right? You can open a lot of doors just by presenting yourself that way. So I love that, Tyson, because that's such first off, you actually did that, a real example of putting your best foot forward and choosing to try to show up differently in this world where there's a lot of people trying to do a music thing. There's a lot of people that could offer these different skills, but at the end of the day, people work with people, So if you can present yourself as a good person and go out of your way, I just think that's the unlock. That's the way to do it. No matter what sphere you want to do, I think that's huge. Dig it.
Yeah, and I guess actually kind of a meta thing is that some of you listening are probably people that I reached out to on Reddit. That's how you came into my world. It's like you consume any of my other content. So there's like, long-term vision too. Like, you're still around, you're still like consuming stuff from me, you're still getting value from me. And that's like a meta example, right? Like we're creating this podcast right now in order to add value to you because we want, like one of our core values between Nathan and I, an overlapping value, I should say, is generosity. Like we want to be able to give before we ever make an ask from you. And so and even if you never buy anything from either of us, you never consume any education from us, you never hire us for a project, you never hire, my company to produce your next single, like that is okay. Because ultimately I'm glad that I'm able to help anybody get a little bit closer to their goals in music. And so, I don't know if I had any other point other than that, but just being generous is so attractive to anybody. And ultimately that is how you are going to be able to build that audience, right? Who is then actually going to pay you for your services, whatever those services are.
Yes.
And the more generous you are, the more likely people are going to be, generous in return to you because they've received so much value. There's inherent like reciprocation. They feel like they owe you almost in that way. So,
huge.
Yeah, let's move on. So, pro tips.
Heyo.
Nathan, let's kick us off with our pro tips. So we've already covered the whole outline of how to do it. So it's go online, find communities talking about music, find out what problems exist for those members in the community, use your skills to fix those problems, and then be a real human and talk to them, build relationships. Eventually, you'll be able to solve their problems because they'll trust you enough to, go forward with a test project or an actual paid project eventually. Okay. With that, here's a pro tips to make this process easier for you.
Let's go. All right, when it comes to monetizing your skills, your music skills, here's a pretty cool hack. You could just ask people who've already made it. Like with social media today, you can reach anyone on the planet. You really can. So if there's someone that you admire, that you kind of look up to, and they're doing the very thing that you envision yourself doing with your music skills or with whatever, there's actually a high chance you can get in contact with that person. You don't have to just hold them on this pedestal and above and they're untouchable and they're all this no, they're just another person. They figured it out. I think there's a high chance that you could just reach out to them. The number of times that I've done this with people that I've just taken a chance to DM on Instagram and be like, hey, really appreciate when you talk about whatever. I had a question about blank. Probably 3 out of 5 times I actually will get a response. It's amazing. I don't know. I just want to say that out loud. You can ask people who have already made it, and kind of in line with the stuff we talk about a lot here, the value of mentorship, the value of quality feedback. You could get right to the person who's doing what you want to do. Be proactive, right? That's another pro tip. Be proactive. Don't be so reactive to things. If you want to get paid for your music, you have to be proactive. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be doing things, going out of your way, like Tyson was when he's reaching out to people and going out of his way to find, just figuring it out, choosing to believe everything's figure outable. He didn't sit there and make an excuse of, okay, how could I get their audio file? Or he wasn't like, oh, it's not the 32-bit float WAV file. I'm not going to master it. You know what I mean? No, he was like, I'm going to freaking just screen record and download and just, it's proactiveness, tenacity, getting after it. And then in line with people being out there, okay, maybe you don't get a response back in the DMs or something from someone who's doing something you want to do. It's probably okay. They're busy, There's probably also a way that you can pay for access. And I think that you can't be afraid to pay for access. I'm sure Tyson and I both have plenty of stories where we have paid money, our hard-earned money, just to join a community, just to hop on a call, just to whatever, get in the room with someone who is steps ahead of us, who's doing something that we want to do or doing something we want to emulate. I just want to encourage you, how do I make money with my music? You can accelerate it by not being afraid to pay for access to people who can help you do the thing, who can bring you along the way, So I just think that's something where this comes down to you not making excuses, because really in today's world, there's no excuse. All the information is out there. I mean, oh my goodness, Google, right? Like you can figure out anything. Chat GPT, oh my goodness, like you can figure out anything. It's not a knowledge issue, right? So it's going to come down to you just not making excuses and choosing to be proactive, attempting to get in contact with people who are doing things you want to do that can help speed up this process of you making money off your music, right? Because if someone else did it, that means you could do it too, right? It's like there's no reason you can't. You just might need to get proximity to that person. And like one conversation could change everything for you. You just don't know. That's happened so many times to me. So what do you think about that, Tyson?
Yeah, no, I think that going off the paying for access is huge. Not only because you get to basically rub shoulders with your dream, producer or whoever, right? Like it's incredibly possible. Also, I wouldn't even say that. So paying for access to courses is also another way. Even though they may not be there live for you, they're still giving you the knowledge. They're giving you the training that or how they like think about problems, how they think about how to compress a kick drum, for example. Like even small things like that, you get an inside look on like how they communicate, how they talk, how they think about problems inside of their music that you can then take back into your own music and solve your own problems using their mentality. So you get to kind of borrow some of that even through a live scenario. A lot of people though too, even high level, like people you put on a pedestal, they may not actually be as like financially successful as you might think. Don't assume that people are more successful than they are all the time, because people love to put like a facade of like, oh, I'm like super successful, guys. In reality, they may not be. But they still might possess the skills that you need to for you to be successful, right?
Yeah.
So along the lines of paying for access, don't be afraid to make up your own product. Meaning, if I want, say I'm trying to learn songwriting and I want to hire Nathan to teach me songwriting, I can approach him and say, hey, Nathan, would you be willing to like sit down with me for 4 weeks, like, 1 hour coaching calls or something? Like, would you be willing to do that? I can pay you X a number of dollars. And he will say yes or no. And then we can, or he might say like, yes, but I need, X number of dollars, not X number of dollars.
Sure.
And so then you can negotiate your own product. Or, if I need more time, for example, I can say, yeah, I can pay you more, but I need an extra coaching call or something. Like there's an unlimited number of options here. And I think that people are so, I don't know what it is about, like, especially Americans. I feel like we're terrible at this. We don't know how to negotiate. And so like, when we go to Target, we just like assume like, oh, it says $14.99. Like I have to pay $14.99. Where it's probably true at Target. You can't negotiate there.
Unless you got a coupon.
But think about approaching your heroes or like people you follow or people you respect in music, and think about like, I can approach them and like ask them, just like throw out an offer of like, hey, I'm going to pay you X number of dollars for X in return. They will say yes or no, or give you a third option. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, even if they don't have a product that fits what you want or you need, they can probably make something up for you and coach you one-on-one, or, something else, or give you a resource, refer you to somebody else who does teach that thing. And more people are willing to help you out than you probably think. You just need to go forward and ask them. Yes. And I'm also preaching to myself right now, because I didn't do that for the longest time, and I regret it, because the minute I started doing this, of being willing to pay even a little bit of money for access to people who were at a much higher level than me, I immediately adopted their mentality about how to run my mastering business, how to master, how to mix my music, how to produce music, all of this stuff. And it really raised my bar of like what I'm willing to accept from myself to the stratosphere comparatively to where I was before that. Okay. And this kind of goes into the very last point that we have for you, which is be resourceful.
Yes.
Just go and figure it out.
Yes.
And part of, actually, I'm going to show you, if you're on YouTube, you can see this. And this is not to show off, but so this is a trophy. And I got it from a paid community, a paid course. It says AAB 7.0, first place, Team Alpha.
Let's go.
So I was the team leader for this team. It was a course that I had bought, and then as part of the course, you did a boot camp. And you basically, competed against all the other teams, and then you earned points by doing tasks, right? So kind of a basic thing. But the whole point of part of this was like he gave you a task and you had to figure it out. Like we had to run Facebook ads. It's like if you hadn't run Facebook ads before, you just had to figure it out. You had to Google, how do I set up a Facebook ads account? How do I set up a Facebook business profile? Yeah. How do I create a campaign inside of Facebook Ads Manager? So there's all these things that you just had to figure out that wasn't like spelled out for you. And while it's nice if things are spelled out for you, it's not. Life doesn't work that way. And so one of the core concepts that I still use to this day from this experience that I had through this paid course in this boot camp was this concept of FITFO. And I'm not going to curse on the podcast because I don't really like cursing, but it's the FITFO stands for figure it the F out. Just do it. If you don't know how to do it, find out either a resource, a YouTube video that will show you how to do it, or find somebody else who has already done it and then do it.
Yes. Don't settle.
Yeah.
This is the thing. There's no invitation. It took me so long to figure this out. There's no one's going to give you an invitation to do what you want to do. Like, if you're waiting for someone to hand it to you on a silver platter, this is not how this thing happens. No, you're not just going to get a knock on your door or a phone call or a random text that is, "Hey, you've been invited to live your dreams." That's just, there's no such thing. Like, you have to be proactive. You have to be resourceful. Kind of like take your life into your own hands. Like, choose to exist in your life for a second. Get off the couch and be here. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's some sort of visceral thing that you have to have, I think, in order to actually get to the point where you're being paid to just do music each and every day. You got to have some sort of gusto inside there, because if it was easy, the cliche saying, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. There'd be producers all over the place that are full-time, independent artists that are all over the place that don't have a day job, right? Like, it'd be so easy. If it was so easy, everyone would do it. So don't get upset because it's not easy. Embrace it and control what you can control, right? Like, I think that's the thing to take away. That is the pro tip when it comes to how to make money from music, and there's all the tactics, there's all the things, but I really think those are details and they don't have a place. The tactics don't have a place unless your mentality is in the right freaking place and your heart's in the right freaking place. Because otherwise, I just think you're just running uphill. You know what I mean? So Figure it the frick out.
So I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up here. Ultimately, taking ownership over your situation, over your life, not making excuses for yourself, even if you legitimately have great excuses to make. Yeah. They don't serve you. That's not going to help you move forward towards your goals. So accept where you're at and don't make excuses for yourself, but just lean into that aspect of making the best of whatever situation you're in, taking ownership over your situation and leaning towards that, and having a little bit of grit to be able to push through those times. And one little quote here that I want to add in is, if you have to do something, like for myself, it was leaving comments on Reddit posts, taking their audio, mastering it, DMing them with the master. Like, I had to do that hundreds of times before I got some clients out of it. And it was boring. It was sometimes fun, but most of the time it was just boring because I had to just go through the same exact process over and over and over and over. And part of the quote, though, that I want to share is that even when you're in those situations where it's hard, first of all, you have to realize that people who don't make it aren't willing to do what you're doing. So if you want to make it more than them, just keep doing it. People who quit don't make it. And then the second thing is, this will be part of the story you tell someday. So when you're successful, when you've reached that upper echelon of whatever your goal is in music, you're going to look back and you're going to say, people are going to ask you, like, how did you do this? Like, how did you make it as a music producer? Like, how did you make it as an artist? And you're going to tell them, like, those hard times that you had to go through to get to where you're at today.
Yeah.
Or, in the future, 5 years from now, you're going to be able to tell them, this is what I did, and it sucked. But you're going to be proud that you did it because it was hard. And that's going to become a core part of your story. It's like the typical entrepreneurial journey of, like, I slept in the garage and I ate top ramen for 3 years and I got scurvy because I had no nutrients in my body. Right? It's like,
right.
That's the stereotypical experience. But at the same time, everybody has one of those, rocky scenes of, training really hard, but that, rocky scene lasted probably 2 years or something in reality, right? You grinded.
Yeah.
And I use that term lightly. You grind doesn't mean you work 24/7. It just means it was hard, it was boring, but you did it anyway. So I hope that is encouraging to some of you who are still not where you want to be and are still working your way into more professional eras of the music realm, whether that's working on your skills, whether that's doing the boring work of just reaching out to people, building relationships, building community around this thing that we call music. If you're struggling to get that industry standard quality for your mixes, then go ahead and check out my book, The Objective Mix. It teaches you the objective standards of how to get an industry standard quality mix. There's a link in the description if you are interested in that. Let's get back to the video. With that, thanks for watching and listening to this episode of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. And if you wouldn't mind, if you got any value out of this podcast, then go ahead and leave us a review and also leave us a comment about anything that you want us to cover in the future. If it's more about music production, if you want us to get super tactical on what gear we have in our setup, we're happy to do that for you. Disclaimer, it'd be a very short episode because we don't have that much gear.
Yeah, we're not.
But anything around music, anything around music production that you want to know that you think is holding you back right now, then leave us that in a review or a comment below the video, and we will 100% make a future episode about that for you to help you out. Okay. With that, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in the next episode of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast.